Good afternoon. Dear pilgrims, on this Sunday afternoon, would like to offer a meditation together on the role of angels in the divine liturgy, with both sides of their mission. The first one is how they celebrate in heaven the liturgy, and how they are part of how they immerse themselves into in the liturgy of our world. Of course, there's a link between both of them. The liturgy of heaven is the model, and the liturgy of the earth is the symbol of the heavenly worship. But there is a relation between both, of course, because between the model and its and the effect of the representation, there is a similarity, first of all, and secondly, there is also here in our case, in the situation of the Catholic liturgy, there is a real presentation of the liturgy of heaven in our liturgy in the liturgy of the Catholic Church. It's not just a memory or a remembrance or an anticipation with a sort of as a wish or as a desire, but this desire is effective. That is to say, the liturgy of heaven we hope and we desire to celebrate one day is already happening in the church liturgy nowadays, and every time we celebrate a sacrament or receive a sacramental. The angels in the liturgy have, as I said, two roles. The first one is the obvious role they have is their mission in the liturgy in the world, beginning, and there are so many mentions of the involvement of angels in the liturgy, in the worship, in the Old Testament. I just want to highlight two of them. The first one, of course, is the participation of the angels in the sacrifice of the Old Testament. There were various kind of sacrifices for the sin, propitiation, adoration, Eucharistic. So these different sacrifices were offered by the priest, but the perfect sacrifice, which is the sacrifice of propitiation, the whole victim was burnt, and sometimes the angel of God would intervene and light the fire to the sacrifice, to consume the whole sacrifice by the burning of the victim. One of the most interesting consequence of this angelical intervention in the liturgy is to see that the angel would intervene in the most sacrificial part of the Hebrew and the Jewish worship. They would stay, I would say, a sort of distance from the rest, from other sacrifices. Before this one, the sacrifice of propitiation is subject to their direct intervention. The other one in the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus, and in the history of the true history of Jacob, who laid on his head on the stone, as by the way, a symbol of the Sacred Heart, or a symbol of a prophecy of Saint John during the Last Supper. Jacob's, in his in his sleep, had a vision of the ladder, the famous ladder of Jacob, from the earth, touching base touching the earth, and going to leading vertically leading to heaven. And he saw this ladder, and also in the meantime there were on this ladder erected between the world, between the earth, this world, and heaven. He saw the angels going up and down, moving towards heaven or down to earth from heaven. So there was sort of a flow of angels, as he could see them, going from heaven to earth, etc., and returning. And here we have got a clear a better understanding of the mission of the angels in the liturgy. The liturgy clearly in the vision of Jacob must be the liturgy is the ladder. The ladder, the liturgy has got feet on earth and head in heaven, as a tree, but this way there is a ladder, and here the liturgy is founded on the revelation. The liturgy holds between the Holy Scripture and the tradition, and these are the two the direction of the ladder is constructed based on the tradition and the Holy Scripture, and this is the core of the Catholic liturgy. If you drop one of them, the ladder would not survive. The ladder would be, you would dismantle. If you touch any of these, the liturgy is dismantled as it is, and as it were in Jacob's vision. And also the steps of the ladder are clearly the virtues of the Christian life, the virtue to and the progress, helping and leading the progress step by step to become saints to heaven. The liturgy is erected to guide all souls from this life to the next one. And the angels are using and are constantly present in the liturgy, and this is the first aspect of the vision of Jacob. The angels are constantly, and the text is clear, constantly and unceasingly coming down to earth and back to heaven, and they are active in the liturgy, present and active. They never stop, and all around the world they would come along where any celebration is performed. And they would, so this is the notion of their presence and their movement. They don't stop. If we attend the liturgy, we can be sure there are angels individually acting during this liturgy. And what are they doing? Of course, they are bringing all the graces down to earth, and they convey the grace of God, and they help us to dispose ourselves to receive them. They are not cause of the grace, because they are not God, but they convey, they are the ministers, the invisible ministers of the divinity, conveying his life towards this world. And in the meantime, and this is what we call the descending role of the angels, and the ascending role of the angel is to lift our sides toward heaven and to open our hearts to the divine grace. So they have got, they are ministers of Christ, and they are ministers in a way of men by bearing, by helping them to bear good fruit from the reception and good preparation to receive the sacrament, in particular the sacrament of confession. This is the role of the angels. Clearly, they have no role as server on the sanctuary, but they serve in the way that they open hearts and minds to the splendor of the of heaven, and they open hearts, the souls, to the better intimacy with our blessed Lord, who is present on the altar for them or in the tabernacle for them. And this is the great vision of Jacob must be meditated, and if you have any time during the day, in silence tonight, if you're not too tired, to open the Holy Scripture and read again this famous history of Jacob. In the New Testament, we can see their role in the liturgy. Well, the role of in the liturgy is not as clear as it was in the Old Testament. Why? Because, of course, in the New Testament, the old covenant, the old liturgies were about to end because Christ would open the church, the new life of the New Testament would be opened by assuming all gestures of the Old Testament, of sacrifices of the Old Testament. But he institutes the seven sacraments of the Catholic Church as such, or elevates the sacrament of marriage to the level of a sacrament. But the angels have a more visible activity and mission and role in the liturgy of the Old Testament because Christ had not had not opened the New Testament, the new sacramental life. It was still closed and not founded. Therefore, the angels had to play, to do, and to act wider in the sacrifices of the Old Testament, and more visibly in preparation for the priest, the supreme priest's visit and incarnation in the womb of Our Lady. And because Christ was by nature, and in the union between the divine nature and the human nature, he was confirmed. He's a priest from all eternity, but now the priest is made, his priesthood is made visible and directly acting in the celebration of the sacraments. Christ had no need to use sacraments because he was God, so he could sanctify souls and forgive the sins without the sacraments, but he decided to found this series of seven sacraments for the benefit of the church. Because he was visible, and he would take the first place, the primacy, the angels, as good servers and ministers, would take on second. Their role was a little bit more unseen, not diminished, but different and more unseen. And this is so true that when Christ, at the resurrection of Christ, when Christ, at the resurrection, the event of the resurrection, as well as the ascension, is announced by the angels, or is confirmed or explained by angels. So this is their mission now in church, is more invisible, because now we've got, after Christ, all the priests would come to celebrate the liturgy in persona Christi, which is different from the Old Testament, that's for sure. So as other priests, other Christs, so the angels are still active, but in a different way, more discreetly. Now they are very active in the liturgy, still active, in particular in the liturgy. We mentioned them in the Mass. If you open your missal later on again, you would see their name is mentioned at the incensation of the altar, at the offertory, under the name of Saint Michael, and also clearly mentioned at straight after the consecration, when we ask these gifts, that is to say, the consecrate speeches, the real presence, to be brought by the angel, unknown, to the altar of God, in heaven, in order to bring it to the what we call the heavenly liturgy. So there is always a link, and the angels are still here between this, our masses, and the liturgy of heaven. They are still here, and we are asking them to do this, to continue. So this link between both liturgies, and in a way, this is what they are good at, and why we are asking them still during after the consecration. So we can say really that the role of the angels have never ever stopped. We're still mentioning them. We're still asking them to be the ministers of the heavenly liturgy, and also to open us to these divine liturgies celebrated in heaven. They open the eyes of not only to the beautiful liturgy we have in the Roman liturgy on earth, but also as to tell us, to inspire us, the desire of to participate in the next liturgy, which would definitely be more splendid, which would be more beautiful, more powerful than our liturgies of this life. Let us ask the angels to help us, and please pay attention during Mass. All the different invocation to the angels are here, present, unseen, but most efficient.